Okay, so here we go with my review of The Stand. This is the 1994 miniseries that is adapted from the book of the same name. So, this is not going to be heavily scripted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about my initial thoughts and my sort of recommendations for people who haven't read the book, and then I'm going to get into full spoilers. So the first thing I'm going to say about this is I would recommend this. I thought it was good. It wasn't a masterpiece by any means, but I thought it was good enough, and I think it's worth a watch. So I would recommend this to anyone who either is interested in the story and is not going to read the book, or has read the book and wants to check this out. The reason I wouldn't recommend this if you're going to read the book is, just like any other print medium, you should start with your own mental picture, I think. If you watch the movie or the TV series, then someone else's mental picture is going to be implanted in your mind. I think it's better to imagine it how you would imagine it the first time, and I think it's true of this story too, because, well, not a ton of things are altered in the TV series. There are some things that are just drastically different, and so I think if you're going to experience it for the first time in this way, definitely stick with the book. So the first thing to note if you're going to watch this is that it is super long. It is a 6-hour-long miniseries. Now, I know by modern standards of how long a season is, that's not too bad, but it is going to take you a little bit to get through for something that's just adapted from one book. So, length, first thing. Second thing is, this is toned down a little bit from the book version, but there is some violence in this, and most of the time it's pretty tame, but there are some notable exceptions. There are depictions of just about every kind of violence in this, including sexual violence. So that is something to keep in mind if you're going to be watching this and you don't know anything about the book. Another thing to note, this program does have some flashing lights in it. So if you're a person who has a problem with that kind of thing, definitely keep that in mind. In the description section, I'm going to be giving a little bit of a blurb, and I will describe the kinds of scenes that have flashing, but I won't give specific timestamps because I just haven't gone back to do that. But I will give specifics about the kinds of scenes that do contain flashing, but I'm going to keep it in the description because there are some people who might want to go into this totally blind who don't have a problem with those kinds of things. So for those people, I won't talk about that here. I'll talk about it in the description. Okay, so after this point, I'm going to be getting into full spoilers. So if that's all you wanted to know about the series, and you still want to watch it for the first time, then thank you so much for your review, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. So now getting into everything else, I'm going to be talking about the book in addition to the series, because I think it's important to talk about both since this is an adaptation. So, the opener of this series. I really liked it. The Don't Fear the Reaper scene and the military facility with the virus getting out. That was really great. When I read the book, I imagined it taking place at night, but it's okay. During the day, maybe they had a filming schedule conflict or something, or maybe it was just meant to take place that way and I don't remember. But it worked well. I like that there are references to Randall Flagg from the very beginning. I'm not sure if they did that in the book. Like I said, it's been a while since I read the book, and it took me a long time to read it. Actually, I don't know if I said it or not. It's been a while since I read the book, and it took me a while to read it. But I think the references being from the very beginning worked pretty well, because Randall Flagg is not something that they can get into as much detail in the series as they could in the book. So I think sprinkling in all those references all throughout the series was a really, really clever way to do that. And so, opener worked really well. Now the rest of it's a little bit more mixed quality, but I'll say this real quick about the whole thing and the way they condensed it. I think the way this was condensed was pretty smart most of the time. I never really felt, well, I did in a few places, but most of the time I didn't feel like they were really leaving something out where I was thinking, oh man, I really wish they would have gone into that more for this series, because for what they cut, it seemed pretty smart. Some of that was cutting out entire characters, some of it was combining different character arcs, but overall, I thought it worked well. But I guess I'll talk about this now because it is one of the first things you notice. The violence is severely cut down, and this is something that worked pretty well, I think, for the way the series was as far as tone, but there are some times where you just really notice it, that they didn't go into full detail about something, because this is supposed to be a society breaking down in the presence of the police and the military trying to control information and trying to keep it out of the hands of the population by any means necessary. And sometimes it's like CSI is more violent than this, even though this book is full of these sorts of horrifying scenes. So I understand for the adaptation, it worked kind of well, and it was implied. All of that stuff was implied. I mean, you could have worked it out in your mind if you were watching this for the first time. But I think actually being there in those scenes is why they were so impactful in the book. And with the violence being toned down, it made some scenes stick out like a sore thumb. Like I said, there are scenes of sexual violence. There are scenes where you see tons and tons of dead bodies, and it's like those kind of stick out now versus in the book, this whole world was kind of just basically going to shit. And when you watch it in the series and these certain scenes that were important get stuck in there, it really kind of has a tonal shift, because some of the scenes, weirdly, in the TV series are almost family friendly, and others are really, really not. So that was kind of a tonal issue for me. Also concerning tonal issues, there are some scenes in this series that contain some unintentional hilarity. Stu Redman escaping from the virus facility, and this guy, I don't remember what he says, but he says something to him about how it's so dark, and Stu like screams and kicks him down the stairs, and that wasn't supposed to be funny, but I had to pause it. It made me laugh so hard. It was just the way that was done, just it really made me laugh, and it kind of took me out of the scene. And I guess that leads me to my next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the acting. So concerning the acting and the character portrayals as well, for the most part, it was pretty good. There were some exceptions, just like there's exceptions to everything. That's good in a story usually. But for the most part, it was good. There were some times when it felt like the actors were just reading off of a piece of paper, and that was a problem. But for the most part, it was good. The lady who played Mother Abigail did a really good job. The guy who played Tom Cullen did a really good job. Actually, fun fact, that's the voice actor for Patrick Star from SpongeBob. He did a good job too. Both of those characters are kind of stereotypes, but within that context and for the role they had to play, they both did a good job. And I do like both of those characters still. The only character that I thought was really a problem was Randall Flagg. And that was because the guy who played Randall Flagg seemed to be playing him as kind of just a jerk. In the book, he's supposed to be a character who's very smooth-talking and kind of persuasive, but in this, he just kind of seemed like a guy that you wouldn't want to associate with, and who might coerce people into following him, but not really someone that people would flock to and follow by choice. So that was an issue, and especially that weird thing going on with his face where it would just actually transform, and it was less psychological, which is sort of the way it seemed in the book. His face would actually physically transform into this weird demon thing, and he came off more like some sort of Power Rangers villain or some other 90s TV villain from a kid's show, and less like Randall Flagg, the Dark Man, the walking dude. So that was an issue for me. However, the actor who played Kojak, 5 stars. So I guess I'll hit on some of the positives again real quick. The cinematography in this, some of it was really good. I liked the shots with Randall Flagg at the campfire when he sort of walks out of the flames. That was really cool. The shots with the 4 guys walking into the distance, that's pretty iconic for Westerns, and I do consider this kind of a Western. And a lot of that reminded me of Lord of the Rings, just sort of them going on that long journey. So I did like that. I guess I should mention this too, since this is a Stephen King story. There were some pretty good scares in this. Some of it wasn't done all that well, but I think some things that were supposed to be kind of creepy or scary were done pretty well. I think the best example of that is the nightmare scenes. Baby, Can You Dig Your Man? That was decent. I liked the song in the series. I pictured it a little bit different. It's a song. I heard it in my head a little bit different, but I like that in the series everybody was singing it wrong. I was really amused by that, and it's even pointed out at one point, like, hey, I think you're singing that wrong. I thought that was funny. It was a nice little touch. So now I suppose I'll get into the ending and my final thoughts. So, the ending to the series. This is going to be kind of strange for me, because if you saw my other review of the book, in that one I said the extended version has this ending that I really don't like because the second epilogue seems to kind of do a disservice to the first epilogue. The first epilogue leaves things kind of ambiguous and open, and I thought that was a great message because the ending of the book was saying, hey, are people going to learn from these mistakes? Are people going to improve before anything happens that we can't reverse? And I thought that was great. And then the second epilogue came along and it was like, never mind, Randall Flagg's back and everything's bad. And I thought that was a terrible way to end that. It wasn't because it wasn't rosy or anything. It seemed to kind of undermine the first epilogue. So I had my problem with that. And then I got to the ending in this series and I had almost exactly the opposite criticism. So rather than ending it on a gratuitously pessimistic note, this seems to end it on a gratuitously optimistic note. Because in the book, in that scene that I really like, which I thought should have been the ending, Stu Redman's thinking about the weaponization of the police force within the free zone, and he's thinking about how weapons of mass destruction lead to all these negative consequences that no one ever thinks about, and teaching the future generations that these are not toys, these are not things to play with. And he asked Franny, do you think that people ever learn anything? And she says, I don't know. And I thought that was great. And I thought the next scene undermined that. In this one, he asked her, do you think people ever change? Do you think people ever change? And she says, I don't know. And then she says something positive about the baby. And in the scene also, we have a shot of their baby in the hospital, and then for some reason Mother Abigail comes in and kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi's in and is like, you did a good job. And oh my goodness, that was way too sweet. That was way too rosy. I totally understand leaving out the second scene. I totally understand leaving out the scene with Randall Flagg. I'm glad that wasn't in there. But the question that she asked, or excuse me, the question that Stu asked, I think was significantly less profound. Because the question was not about whether a person learns something or whether a person changes in their own lifetime. The question is about whether generations learn from one another, whether people learn from the past. So I think, especially since that other part about Stu thinking about all these things is left out, changing the question too, and then to have it followed up by this other thing, which is really sweet, I don't know. I think that really kind of undermined the point of the story. This story, I think, from Stephen King is supposed to be a warning. It's supposed to be warning people about the dangers of using these kinds of weapons. But it's like, in the series, everything worked out fine and they lived happily ever after. And I didn't like that. And I get why they did it. You know, I get it. It's a long TV series and people don't want to end it on a negative note. They want to get those good ratings, and I get that. But I don't think that was a good idea. And it made me feel good inside, but I think for the sake of telling a good story, it was not a good decision. But anyway, as I said, I would recommend this. Despite all that, there are some things in it that are kind of cheesy. There are some kind of bad effects in here. There's some bad acting in a few places. But, you know, I'm not crazy about The Stand. It's not my favorite story. I do like it, but it's not something that I think is a masterpiece or anything. So, you know, as this kind of adaptation, I think it's fine. It's kind of a cheesy TV movie from the mid-90s. It's fine. I think it works decently well, even for people who haven't read the book. I'd give it a 7 or 8 out of 10. So guys, that's my review of The Stand TV series, 1994. And if you like this content, go ahead and like this content, because I will be having more of it, and I will be posting more videos in my series of my review of It, the novel. So, thank you for watching, and have a fantastic day.